Welcome to the Educational Passport Foundation. With the support of Epf.Africa Youth Association and United Nations online volunteers, we have highlighted real stories regarding migration, education, poverty, and unemployment in the Republic of the Gambia. We invite you to watch and discover the current challenges and implications so that we can learn how to help solve them and support.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to EPF Interviews. I am Elijah from EPF.
And I'm Amanda, a United Nations online volunteer. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about EPF. So we are a registered non-profit charity foundation that aims to support underprivileged youth in the Gambia. The Educational Passport Foundation, with the support of Simuka Youth Association of Zimbabwe and the United Nations online volunteers, aim to support less privileged school dropouts to return back to school. Most young people in these countries lack one fundamental right, which is to have access to quality education. And this is mainly caused by lack of financial assistance. Therefore, EPF has created an initiative to help these individuals achieve their goals.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And today here we have Dr. Suleiman Njie, or Saul Njie, a political scientist, a visiting professor at Bluefield College. Thanks for joining us again, Dr. Njie.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate you for coming too, Right. So, I know we had a conversation before, and then for those people who might be just watching this, if you would like to add something to your background or your professional background, for the benefit of those who are just watching this.
Sure. So I'm a visiting professor at Bluefield State College in West Virginia. I've been a visiting professor there for about 7 years. Mix and match, visiting an adjunct since 2014, January of 2014. But I'm also working as a policy and research analyst for the United States Government Accountability Office, which is the research and investigative arm of the United States Congress. So the Government Accountability Office provides oversight and also advises federal agencies on how to actually go about with their policies and be in compliance with the laws of these United States. Disclaimer, I'm not here on behalf of the United States federal government in any way. I'm just here in my individual capacity as somebody who's studied Gambian political economy for the last 12, 13 years.
That's amazing. Quite impressive, Doc.
Oh,
yeah.
So I have a question for you. So how does the political awareness amongst the masses impact the growth of a nation?
It is important because in a democracy, democracy relies on an informed citizenry, right? So the citizens have to be informed, well informed, to be able to make decisions. That's why, for example, in the United States, when the founders were drafting the Article of Confederation and also the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist documents, they argued against the idea of democracy because they assumed democracy is mob justice and that a lot of people are going to be part of it who really don't understand what they're doing. And that was their argument. That doesn't mean it's a noble argument, but it's an academic argument nonetheless. So in a country like the Gambia, we have a Western system of government, and I think for the most part, a good chunk of our citizens really do not understand the kind of contract they have with the state. So this is where some of the problems come to the fore. So since we started doing this in 1960 in the Gambia, before independence, when we started voting, and then obviously we expanded the franchise from the crown colony to the protectorate, we have mostly been voting based on the cult of the person. What I mean by that, we seldom vote based on ideas. It's more of like personalities and whatnot. And that has also, I think, to a certain extent, affected the political and also the socioeconomic development of the country. Because when people are voting based on whims and emotions, rather than ideas. And also, beyond that, democracy requires people to be fully engaged and fully involved. That means that it goes beyond voting, right? You have to petition the state. You have to hold the state accountable. There are a lot of different things that go into, the democratic dispensation. And in the case of the Gambia, when we talk about democracy and the state, we're always thinking about the president. We forget that the local governments, the mayors, the people in the parliament, these are all part of the democratic process, but so is the media. The media is also part of it. So, and obviously civil society has a role to play in pushing the government to do their bidding. So it's, in a nutshell, an informed citizenry is very crucial. It's very important in the maturation of any democracy or any state.
Thanks for your answer. So what do you think can be done for people to have a much more concrete understanding of policies rather than just going by emotion?
That is hard though, right? Even here in the United States, a lot of people vote on emotions, really. I read a book by Daniel Kahneman called Noise. It's a really fascinating book. He's a behavioral economist, more of a psychologist who's really rooted in economics. And he argued that even here in the United States, or even in Britain, the pro-Brexit and anti-Brexit, the pro-abortion, anti-abortion, most of those things, people already believe, they already have a mindset. So they only look for reasons to support their ideas. They look for policies that actually confirms their beliefs, right? So people are mostly attuned to drama and noise. And it's really hard for people to be really into the policy because our minds don't like complexity. We like easy things. And whenever complexity comes into play, it's really complicated for people to grasp. So that's why politicians, for example, Obama here in 2007 and 8, he had one slogan, yes, we can. And that was it. Everybody was going with it.
Yeah.
He had policies, but who cares, right? People are just attuned to that. In the Gambia, unfortunately, our politics is ethno-linguistic in its orientation. And that means it's tribal. And when I say tribal, I don't mean it in the raw term because Gambia, we really don't have like tribes. We have ethno-linguistic groupings. That's what we have because these are not really tribes like that have evolved for centuries. It's more of like ethno-linguistic. And that determines, for the most part, who you vote for. It was there, during independence. That's actually a whole party was created to represent people who live in the provinces called the People Protectorate's Party on the Jawara. And then you have an Oran party on the Njie. And Njie came and dismantled that. But it's back again, right? Because when Njie came, he just got rid of all of the old parties. So, we had to start from scratch. But now, our politics has, is back to that basic of a tribe. That means a team, right? You support the home team no matter what. Many of these people were supporting these political parties well before they even come out with a manifesto, right? So how you fix this, I don't think that's a silver bullet, to be honest. I don't think so. Sensitization works to a certain extent, but it has its limitations. And I don't agree with people who say that education is going to change people's minds and how they vote and stuff. Educated people are not very different from the people they come from. They're lazy too. They don't want to do, especially in politics, because people have their own problems. Politics, we look at it as more of a peripheral thing. It's emotional. It's very connected to us, but we don't want to do the extra work. We want the politicians to do that for us, right? The policies and stuff. So what they do, they just give us the basic stuff and we consume that. And if anything that we know about politicians in the last, 10,000 years is that one thing they're good at is winning elections because they have to win. That's the most important thing to do, right? And the goal of a political party is to acquire power. If they know that the way they're going to do that is by appealing to the emotions of the people, they're going to do it. I mean, Richard Nixon in the United States, when he ran against Ellen and Douglas in California in the Senate, I think that was in 1948, he was just brutal. He lied his way to the Senate. And after the election, they asked him, why? Why were you so brutal? Why were you lying? And he said, people actually don't react to love, they react to fear. And he said, they don't teach this in Sunday school, but they should. And he's right. People react, they're attuned to the drama, they're fear of the order. And when you create the order, you get people on your side. It becomes a tribe in that sense. So it's hard to fix some of the, but we have seen some models. For example, in Gambia, in Wuli, we have the Doi party on the Sidia Jata there, and they've been voting for, and this is a provincial town, a provincial district. It's not like in a city or anything. And they've been voting for a party that really is not around the cult of the person, but it also helps that Sidia is also from Wuli. He's from, what is it called, Sudukova, I think. So that helps a little bit, right? But even in the most enlightened of environments, we human beings at our base, we're emotional animals. So it's really hard to say there's one way to fix this problem. Education helps, but it has its limitations, and we have to be aware of that.
Amazing. Well said, Doc. It's important, we set light on these things. I know we are promoting education and all of that, but, politics is part of us. We can have education, but if we don't have politics, good politics too, the education will matter. So it's important for our young people to, you said it, and I totally agree with you. We have more, biased educated people who are educated than who are not educated. So but it's still important for people to learn these kind of things and understand their way to for a better nation. Thank you so much for that, bro. Yeah. So there's a dichotomy in acquiring wealth in the Gambia, where there is almost like no middle class status, per se. So you can either be rich according to the Gambian standard or be very poor. So what causes that, in your opinion, that gap?
I don't think we can say we don't have a middle class. We actually do. The problem is that the middle class is not working for it. The money is sent by you and I to the Gambia to provide for that middle class living. So there's actually a middle class in the Gambia that is funded by remittance money. And that middle class is growing by the day. In most countries, especially in industrialized countries, the middle class consists of the working class. In Gambia, the middle class is not working class. The middle class is our parents, our cousins, and our uncles and grandparents who are sitting at home receiving more money than actually the actual civil servant. The civil servant in Gambia, the average civil servant, I would say they make about $5,000 a month, which is about $100. Well, our parents receive, some of them, like $500 a month in allowances from their kids overseas, right? So that provides a middle class, actually a very solid middle class. It's very solid and stable living. I mean, look at all of the developments in the Congos.
Right.
That is funded. That's actually a solid middle class. It's actually very solid. The problem is that the middle class is not producing anything. It's just consuming. Mm-hmm. That is the problem. The other problem we have, we actually don't have a lot of wealth in Gambia. Gambia, unlike, say, a country like, say, South Africa, or even maybe India in the colonies, or maybe even, I will say, even Kenya to a certain extent, these were settled and colonized. All of these countries were colonized by Britain. They created industries here, and those industries, they were titans of these industries whose kids actually inherited their wealth. Wealth is actually created by, it has to be generational. We don't have a lot of generational wealth in the Gambia. The richest people we have currently in the Gambia, I mean, these people emerged in the last, 30 years, the Mustafa Njies and when we talk about old money, we're talking about Modu Musa Njie, right, or we're talking about Basiru Jawara. But really, I mean, that's okay, it's money, but really, I mean, but those are probably the few generational wealth we can talk about. We really don't have wealth per se because we don't have industries that actually create this kind of titans like you have in the United States. Like even in South Africa, you have the Gupta family. You have in Kenya, you have very established families in India, in Pakistan. I mean, we're talking about countries where actually you can see the split between the top 1% and the rest. In Gambia, we really don't have a really top 1% because it's just a handful of them. But the gulf, I think, the gap is actually between the middle class and the awfully poor. And the middle class is actually funded by remittance money. That's why it's tied to the migration. That's why it's going to be really hard to stop people from migrating, because your chances of getting out of poverty go, and your family's life too, go significantly high once you have somebody in your family who leaves the country. That way, they can actually create a middle class, lifestyle for you. So the problem is really not, again, super wealthy and super poor. Yes, we do have an income inequality gap in the country, but we don't have a lot of industries, and we don't also have a lot of wealth. We're not in the same situation as industrialized Western countries. Our situation is a little bit more peculiar. We are more of like a middle class that really doesn't produce anything, but they consume everything because they are actually relying on free money that is flowing into the country. Right now you have to remember, remittance money that we send to the Gambia account for almost half of the country's gross domestic product. That's absolutely mind-blowing, half of it. And most of this goes to consumption and stuff. So that's why prices are also going to keep on going up, because the economy is reacting to this money that's coming in. And no matter how prices go up, people are going to afford it. So one thing the government can do, I think we're in a whole lot of mess. And one thing the government, if the government is serious about this, it has to really revamp the whole entire economy. For example, when the Great Depression hit the United States in 1929, that is, the United States realized, especially when Franklin Delano Roosevelt came in, that the private sector was not strong enough to create jobs for the masses. The private sector was not strong enough to help people get out of poverty. The government actually did that. And the government continued doing that until the 70s with the housing programs and stuff, with the GI bills and all that stuff. The Gambia has to be involved in that kind of stuff. The Gambian state has to start producing the jobs, because the private sector is not big enough to produce any jobs. And if the government is serious, they can embark on these things. And this is just one solution. There's several solutions, and one of them is education. We have to revamp the entire education system. I'm sure we're going to get into that later. But we are producing kids who really don't have any skills whatsoever. Today, for example, and I'm using countries like India as good examples, because we were all colonized by the same country. India today, all of the call centers, if you call AT&T here in the United States, you're going to talk to somebody in India. Simple. My neighborhood here, when I was in DC and here in Texas, mostly Indians. And how did they make this work? Is because the Indians understand the importance of the English language. And they have access to it compared to other countries who do not rather. And they make the most out of it. They invested in tech. They invested in different things, and they also push their kids, and they have standards. In the Gambia, the moment we change the common entrance system, and I think that's where the problem started. It started before that, obviously, but when we changed the common entrance system, where kids were not sitting the grade 6 to, when the standardized testing was eliminated, we started having a lot of problems, because again, we shifted our mind from quality to quantity. So the barometer was how many students were graduating rather than the quality of the students that were graduating. So the focus shifted. And in the 21st century, you couldn't have a country of half-baked educated people. And Gambia is full of half-baked educated people, because the institutions are not preparing our students to thrive. So when I was born in 1985, so that means I'm old, the Gambian population was less than 1 million people. Today, the Gambian population is about 2.4 million. Actually, in 1985, the population was only 700,000. Between 1985 and now, and I would say at least between 1990 and now, so the last 30 years, over 1 million people were either born in the Gambia or migrated to the Gambia, but the overwhelming majority were born in the Gambia. So that means we have a whole generation of kids that we have actually failed. Whole generation of students who are graduating with no skills, no jobs, nothing to do, because there are no prospects. What are you going to do in the Gambia? There are no industries. So that's why it's important for the government to think about this thing strategically, to look at things like apprenticeship programs like they have in Germany and, in other countries in the world. But we have to start taking these things seriously.
Right. Thank you, brother. That's really deep. And you talk about all of these, when it comes to the economy of the Gambia, the middle class are particularly from people who send money, the remittance and stuff, but now we've heard like a lot of these crime, with the heights of crime, crime rate is skyrocketing right now. And then, I want your input in this, because you've been involved in the youth of the Gambia, you did research in the Gambia, do you think these crimes are orchestrated by, people who graduated and did not have a job, or people who are less privileged and did not have access to quality education?
So I'm going to answer this in different forms.
Oh.
The first one is that any country where you're going to see thieves exist for a reason. In America, in Britain, most of the thieves are from the lower classes, because again, they actually have to survive. They have to survive. What happened in the Gambia in the last 20 years is the destruction of the compound system. You understand the compound system.
Yeah.
So, Amanda, in the Gambia, many families live in generational households, like where you have the grandparents, the cousins, the aunts, the uncles, everybody living together. So that means that compound is going to provide some kind of a safety net, kind of a buffer. So if my uncle is wealthy, but my father is not, my uncle, the money he brings to the house actually helps my father and his kids, right? So nobody would know. Alani's generation and my generation is a whole different animal. And in that compound system, there's services to our, our kids have access to our, childcare. There's access to childcare, there's access to food and shelter. Growing up, we say Gambia, any compound you go to, you're going to have free meal. And we didn't have homelessness and all the stuff. But that was the old generation. Alani's generation and my generation are building homes in Gambia for ourselves and our nuclear family. That's it. So that means our extended cousins have nowhere else to go. The ones who don't have access to these actually have nowhere else to go. So what exactly do we expect these people to do? They have to survive. So we have a breakdown of the social contract in the Gambia. It's a basic destruction of the social contract, the new nuclear system. And in America, we see this. If people don't have food, they're going to find food. If they don't have shelter, they're going to find some way to pay their rent. So they're going to get it somewhere. They're going to break into your nice house. They have to. They don't have a choice. Obviously, there are obviously people that are just criminally minded. But I could argue that given the stigma that is attached to being a thief in the Gambia, many people really don't want to be. But their choices are also very limited. Some of these, obviously, are students who are still going to school. Some of these are graduates, from high school graduates who actually have no prospects, no outlet whatsoever. If you graduate from a high school in the Gambia today, the average graduate, they can barely write their names. They can barely do basic math. These kids have no skills whatsoever. So we have failed an entire generation of students. So yes, these people are going to come out and they're going to break your home. They have to survive. They need food and shelter. A decade from now, God forbid, we're going to have a lot of homelessness in the Gambia. We're going to have to find ways to establish food pantries and stuff, because people actually are not going to have, you cannot just walk to anybody's home anymore and tell them you're hungry. Our generation, that was okay. Not anymore. They don't know you. They're going to tell you to get out. So you're going to come at night and break their house because you need something. You have to survive. So to some, it's about survival. And yes, there's a good chunk of people who are criminally minded. But some people really, in most societies, this is the fact. Because once you become, I would say, comfortable, you look at the other people as, thieves and all that stuff, as delinquents, bad people. But as a society, are we even asking ourselves, how did we let this happen? We celebrate all our good kids, but for some reason, the bad kids are the bad ones. We're not celebrating. We're not actually taking any kind of accountability. And as a country, we have to take accountability for all of this mess we created. So yes, many of these are high school graduates. Some of them are still going to school, actually. But the government has to do something, because in the case of the Gambia, the third sector can help. You can come with EPF and all that stuff, but they have their limitations, because the infrastructure, the critical infrastructure, only the government can build that. You and I cannot do that. We can do our part to affect change. And if you can affect one change, if you can just change one person's life, that goes a long way. But we're talking about mass here. We're talking about scale. And only the government can do that. And the government has to be serious about how it's tackling this crisis, because most of our students, we're just warehousing them. We're in America, and I've said this many times, in America, in the inner cities, there's this problem called the high school to prison pipeline, where a lot of inner city youth, they don't have any access to any outlets or whatever. They end up being delinquents and being criminals and end up going to jail. In Gambia, we have the high school to nowhere. After high school, where are you going to go? Because you don't have any skills, none whatsoever. You can't even get to the university. And even if you do, it's expensive, unless you have somebody overseas who's paying for it. So we have problems upon problems. And the first thing we need to do is to identify the problem. And the other thing, yes, it's possible that crime is on the rise. It's possible. But it's also possible that we're just documenting it now more than before, where, there are more videos and people are more attuned to WhatsApp and all that stuff. We might think that it's on the rise. The police said it's not. I don't trust the government police, but that's what they said. They said it's not on the rise. But they could be right too, right? Because before, people were still, only the people in the neighborhood know about it. Now, if people steal your stuff, you're going to document it and post it online. Everybody has access to it. They share it with everybody. So emotionally, we think, oh my God, crime is on the rise. But it's possible, actually, that it is not. But even if it is not on the rise, the fact that we have young people breaking into people's homes is a problem. The fact that we have young people who think that the only way out is stealing people's properties and stuff is a problem. So we have layers of problems that we have to deal with. But without the state, I don't see how we can fix this problem, because this is a mass, we're talking about scale, really so big for any third sector to come in and fix for the country. But that doesn't mean we cannot try, right? That doesn't mean that the third sector, we cannot do our part and do what we can to make sure that, we're improving lives and, we help it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's important, for all hands to be on deck. You said it, we're doing our part, as individuals, to citizens, private sectors too, but the government too. We need the government, to help us, be able to, take care of these kids so that they can be out on the streets. And EPF does basically that's the plan. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to provide education for these people, not only to educate them, but create employment for them, have a connection with local business people or local employers to be able to have all these people right after their education, because it's important. If you have your education and you don't have somewhere to hold on to, it's just going to be back to zero.
Right.
That's what things like this going to happen. People going to live in the streets and then do things that are not honorable.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you've told us a lot about how migration actually impacts the population of the Gambia currently, and how the remittance money that is actually passed on from people from the Gambia who have migrated, and how that is able to sustain nearly half of the middle class within Gambia today. So could you tell us a little bit more about the impact of irregular migration on the people of Gambia?
Man, it's massive. Because these are the able-bodied people in the country that are living, right? The youth, the human capital that is actually is flight of human capital, right? That is leaving the country. So there are different problems here, but also there are also many benefits too. Let's not forget about it, right? Because the reason why these young people are leaving and why these people are actually willing to risk their lives to cross the Mediterranean is because there are no outlets in the Gambia. But the other problem is also how Gambian people look at people who travel, how they respect them. As a young person with no access, with no wealth, no income, no respect whatsoever, you hang out, for example, me and Alagi hanging out every day. All of a sudden, he takes the back way, made it to Italy and Germany. 2 years down the road, he's down in Gambia on Christmas holiday with a nice car, a nice girl. And all of the people in the neighborhood are worshiping. And 2 years ago, you were hanging out there, nobody was even looking at you. Wouldn't you want that? You would. Every human being wants that. Overseas provides more than just access to money. It gives you access to people. It gives you love and adoration and respect above everything else. So the moment you travel, you leave the Gambia, your relationship with the people back home changes drastically. The equation changes. You become a demigod. You become somebody people respect. You become somebody people listen to. And boy, every human being wants that. We all want to be listened to and respected and adored. That's something we crave. But it also provides incentives. It provides capital. That's why the Gambian government today is willing to risk its relationship with the European Union by saying that no, they're not going to allow any deportees back into the country. So the European Union today cannot deport people into the Gambia. Gambians who were actually already processed for deportation. The government said, no, we're not going to allow them in here. We're not going to give them the documentation to travel to the Gambia. So they're stuck there. But the government understands this. They understand if these young people come back home, what exactly do they have to offer? Nothing. So what's going to happen? They're going to end up breaking your house and my house because they have to survive. But the optics too are pretty bad. You don't want to be deported. I mean, the stigma around it is just absolutely crazy. But the other thing is the irregular migration. Say, for example, you take the back way, made it to Italy. You're actually in an asylum center. You're probably making 350 euro a month. You're sending 100 to your mom. Your mom, with that money, is making more money than the normal civil servant in the Gambia.
Yeah.
I don't know how we can fix that. I really don't. We can say that people shouldn't take the back way, they shouldn't do irregular migration. But what are we offering? What are the incentives? What are we doing to make them stay? You and I can try, but only the government can do this. We're talking about scale. We can do our part though. That doesn't mean we have to give up. We can sensitize, we can do all the stuff. But when people don't have prospects, when people don't have outlets, I mean, in 2016, when I was doing my doctoral research, I was in the Gambia. And I met a friend of mine that I went to high school with, really smart kid. I mean, absolutely brilliant kid. It was definitely way ahead of me in high school. The guy was a policeman by that time. And we were chatting. He applied to all of the universities overseas in America and in England. He was rejected. He applied to the University of Gambia, but he couldn't get scholarships, so he couldn't afford it. And he really doesn't have relatives who can send him money from overseas. So he joined the police. Now he has 3 kids, maybe more now. And when I met him, he said he was going to take the back way. He was like, I'm making less than $2,000 a month. That's less than $20 a month. And he was like, I can feed my family. I can take care of them. The only way out is to go. And lo and behold, he actually did travel. He did. He took the back road, the back way rather, into Italy. He's still in Italy. I haven't talked to him that much, but I'm sure he can provide more money for his family now with that 350 euro than he was making in the Gambia as a policeman.
Educational Passport Foundation. We turn dreams into actions.